It is such a pleasure for me to interview Dr. Vandana Shiva. She's one of the most eminent fighters for the biodiversity of our planet. Since more than 30 years, not only she revealed and opposed eco-crimes done to our nature, to our agriculture, but she also showed us how the change of paradigm is possible, is not utopistic. In India, and not only with Navdanya, she created and supported models that can be reproduced of sustainable and productive farming. She created and supported hundreds of seed banks communities. So she showed us some examples of the correct way to proceed with justice and respect for our environment, our food, and consequently for our lives and democracy. So welcome, Dr. Vandana Shiva.
Thank you.
Often you have mentioned how there is a huge parallel between military war to sovereign countries and the war to the planet, to the environment. Same instruments, same poisons, but also the reasons given to explain a war are similar. In the main narrative and communication strategy, nowadays, as in the past, we hear about good wars, humanitarian wars, as well as good nuclear weapons. Now, but the reason behind wars are always the same, stealing natural resources. In your report, Gates to a Global Empire, you underline a similar paradox related to the future of our food and the seeds. Do you want to explain what is going on? What are the new threats to our agriculture and future?
So our report called Gates to a Global Empire builds on my earlier book called Oneness versus 1%. And I realized in 2015 at the Paris summit that an economic and a political shift was taking place because Bill Gates was behaving as more powerful than the heads of state. And I said, even billionaires are supposed to be regulated by governments. And now we are suddenly witnessing the emergence of billionaires who have been given so much power by governments that they are now totally unaccountable. So already at that time, it was becoming clear Gates was getting into climate change. That's why he was at the Paris summit. He's just done a book called How to Prevent Climate Disaster. And it writes everything that has, as a solution, that is a cause of the disaster. For example, all my work, my Soil Not Oil and the Navdanya Manifesto on climate change, we show that a big part of emissions comes from industrial chemical-based nitrogen fertilizers. He is offering nitrogen fertilizers as a climate solution. We know that a lot of the hunger has come because breeding shifted to responding to chemicals. He is instead promoting industrial breeding that creates hunger and then saying this is a solution. He's promoting the Green Revolution as a solution. I got into agriculture because my country was the first place where the Green Revolution was imposed. And by 1984, the farmers were rising in protest. Today's protests of the farmers of India are a continuity of a protest not just against a few laws, but against an industrial, globalized, corporate-driven system. So he's getting into climate change with all the wrong solutions. He became a billionaire by patenting what he hadn't invented in the first place. Just like Monsanto patented seed had not invented. So I've always seen a parallel between Microsoft and Monsanto, but now I've said very often that Mr. Microsoft is the new Monsanto because he's fitting right into the boots of Monsanto at a time when the world was rising and saying, we'll march against Monsanto, we'll get rid of it. And people got rid of that company. It had to be dissolved and become part of Bayer because people had come to know so much about Monsanto. So Monsanto started to own seeds, try to own seeds that they hadn't created. Gates, who started to take patents on software, has gone increasingly into control of a seed. I have written a chapter in the Gates to a Global Empire report of the seed empire. So over these years, when the Green Revolution was created, seeds from farmers' fields were taken and put in these global seed banks, rice in Philippines, maize in, and wheat in Mexico, all the dry crops in Ikrisat in Hyderabad. This year, Monsanto has become the biggest funder and controller of this global seed holdings. So all the world's seed supply is now in his hands. Then he's bringing new GMO technologies. Yeah. Genetic engineering is tampering with the living systems at the genetic level. You can do it by adding a gene, or you can do it by editing genes. He has sponsored and financed all of the new gene editing research. He has the patents on gene editing, a company called Aiutaci. And this is then undoing the international laws to protect seed sovereignty. The two laws that protect seed sovereignty are the International Convention on Biological Diversity, which has a Nagoya Protocol, which says you must take permission before you take a seed or biodiversity. And then in the FAO is the seed treaty. Gates is doing digital genomic mapping by just mapping the seeds that are now in his collections, because the public collections are his private collections, and in the Svalbard Gene Bank. And all he does is have to run through a computer and do a genomic reading and then take patents. So he's taking patents through gene editing, he's taking patents through digital genomic mapping. And I was at the Vatican before the lockdown at a big conference, and sadly the FAO representative talked about dematerialization of the seed, talking about this digital genomic mapping. And someone from the audience said, we'd like Dr. Shiva to tell us, is this true or not? I said, no, the seed doesn't get dematerialized. The theft of seed is mystified as if dematerialization is taking place. And this is part of the vocabulary, yeah? Living carbon is the basis of life. Decarbonization is Mr. Gates' new vocabulary. Life is material. It's just that colonialism and industrialism made it look like dead matter. But the fact that they made it look like dead matter didn't mean the matter disappeared. Digitalization doesn't make the matter. It's just that we can have terra madre or terra nullius. And now the terra nullius logic is being pushed one next step. So I see very much Bill Gates as a recolonization of the world, except that the colonies are deeper. First they went out and took the land and our seeds and our biodiversity and the gold and the silver. But what Gates is now mining is the very fabric of life, including our human autonomy. That is what the surveillance capitalism is about. First, it reduces us to minds, not just genetic minds, but minds of thought, minds of behavior, minds of temperature, minds of blood pressure, and all of this bodily and brain activity data is being mined. Microsoft even has a patent application of us being users of their machines, being evaluated by their algorithms according to are we fit or are we not fit. And it's a new eugenics through the digital route. So digital dictatorship is the new eugenics. Digital dictatorship is the new ecocide. Digital dictatorship will, if it's not contained, lead to massive genocide, because in this system, most people will be treated as disposable people.
As you said other times and you wrote, when we can't choose what we grow, when we can't decide the method of production and we cannot determine the price, then we are in slavery. So if we can't have a participative governance, we are in slavery. Now we have these expressions of Bill Gates and philanthropists. Before, maybe it was even clearer the fight because it was against specific corporations with names. Now, maybe we don't even know anymore who is the real enemy. But also when we go through policies, like it happened in Europe with the TTIP agreement, the negotiations were secret. Then TTIP was transformed into CETA. So how can we defend our right to know and choose?
I think the most important way to defend our rights are first be aware of what our rights are. Yeah? Be aware that our first rights are as Earth citizens, to breathe, to have water to drink, to have food to eat, because that is what connects us to the Earth. You know, as I've written often, water is the currency of life. Breath is the currency of life. We call it pranayam. And food is the currency of life. They aren't things and objects. They are the flows of life that move from the earth through plants, other beings to us and back. And this flow makes our life possible. So the first set of rights are rights that flow from Mother Earth. So the rights of Mother Earth become our human rights. We have an entire universal declaration on human rights. Doesn't take too long to understand. And I think every citizen should sit with that UN Human Rights Declaration. And we've also done a draft Declaration on the Rights of Mother Earth with Evo Morales when the Copenhagen summit collapsed. And he said, we were here to protect Mother Earth, not to protect the rights of polluters, because the end of Copenhagen and the internationally binding treaty meant the polluters were protected. And in effect, actually, Paris was really polluters saying, I'll voluntarily do this. And what they're doing is playing amazing games. Yeah. So zero is the new word. But it doesn't mean you get rid of your pollution or your emissions. It just means you play new games to take what free farmers, autonomous farmers do and lock them into a new carbon trading system and use your surveillance technologies to assess exactly what value to give the farmer's carbon. But the farmer is not only talking about carbon, the farmer cultivates life. And there's zinc and there's magnesium. I mean, if they had to assign a price to life, life would be beyond their reach just as much as if wages have to be given to women for all the work they do. There isn't enough money in the world. Yeah. What you need is a value, a respect. Yeah. So the first is the rights to understand relationships, read those two treaties and understand in your daily life where those are being violated. Second, figure out who's violating them. Because even though the states are very active with respect to policing their citizens, they're totally inactive in regulating those they must regulate, which is big money, big tech, big pharma, big billionaires, big asset investment funds, the BlackRocks and the Vanguards and the State Streets. So the governments are failing in their duty. And yet we are going through a whole ritual of going through elections, electing heads of state who don't matter anymore in terms of protecting our lives. That's the reason we need to do two things. Understand who's taking our rights away and figure out how did they get this power. And second, how can you take back power? When I realized Monsanto wanted to take power over the seed, I did the simple act of saving seed. Yeah. So we have to find the simple things that are doable by us as citizens, as communities, and start doing them. Because when your power is being taken away over the everyday things, your seed, your food, your thoughts, your freedom, your health, that's what you have to reclaim. So we have to reclaim our being, our freedom, by A, fully understanding what it means to be alive, healthy, free, and then saying no more. You will not invade.
The problem is also that a major threat of these times is communication and freedom of speech. We are experiencing this now in Italy. And then there is a problem with the use of words. There is like a stealing of words and concepts. Also in the past, for example, the word green was used to describe the Green Revolution, but then as you wrote, green was mostly related to money and militarization rather to nature. And the word sustainable was a flag for the environmental movements, but then this word has been used in the policies that covered other goals. And now we also have another problem with the word sovereignty, as for food sovereignty, for example, especially in Italy. This word now is forcefully related to nationalism, sometimes racism. So anytime we try to defend a local issue, a territory, something related to our lives, daily lives, you risk to be marked as a sovranista, which now in Italy has a bad meaning. It seems like there is also war on information, on words. It's very hard to debate since we are not free to use words and to have doubts.
Well, because hijacking words and giving them the opposite meaning has always been the way fascism has worked, the way dictatorships have worked, which is why Orwell wrote 1984 about doublespeak. Doublespeak means the word you use means is the opposite of what it seems to use. And for that, you have to have co-option of words. So all of the next step of industrial agriculture through digital agriculture, farming without farmers, is using the word we created, regenerative farming. Yeah. So yes, we are at this point where every word of ours is being stolen. We have two options then. Let it be stolen and be left without words. We'll be left speechless. Mm-hmm. Or reclaim the authentic meaning. And the authentic meaning of words is through the living of those words. Because words are not just words that leave you and just move between people. Words embody meaning and life. So we have to stay authentic to the original meanings. Part of, I've done a whole dictionary on economic terms. And part of it was related to the fact that Pope Francis was doing these dialogues on the new economy. And, last year I was to have addressed the youth, which I did through the Zoom, but I was working on the economy of St. Francis. And then I took every word that's in the dominant economic system and went to its etymological roots. And interestingly, all meaningful words have a Latin roots. So you people are very lucky that you're not living a borrowed vocabulary. So invest, God meant making beautiful. Now it means making money after the East India Company was created. 1600 East India Company, 1611 making money. Innovate means to refresh, renew. Today under Gates, innovate means destroy what exists and impose very violent technologies. So we must reclaim our meanings. The second is freedom. Begins from the small and moves all the way up. All the way up, from the cell and the microbe to our individual bodies, to our individual beings, to the individual communities, to our regions. And the reason regions are being absorbed into the national system is because the bioregionalism is becoming a very strong force of regeneration. So we can let it go or say no. The nation is made of regions. Regions are made of communities. Communities are made of people. And reclaim the national level by decentralizing the national and democratizing the national. Otherwise, what we will have is exactly what you had in Mussolini's time. Exactly what was in Germany in Hitler's time. You will have a fascist nationalism that works against the people, treats most people as enemies, and is totally married to corporate greed. So all you have to do is go back to Mussolini and say, no, that's not where we will go. For us, sovereignty is local, regional, national, global. And global sovereignty is we have to protect the UN system. The WHO was hijacked, but this year, Bill Gates is hijacking the FAO based in Italy. 500 organizations have said we will not participate in the food summit. It's been taken from Rome to New York, and Gates is appointed as the head, not an elected official, not a representative of a government, but a woman who represented his Green Revolution in Africa. So it's a Gates summit. And Gates summit means FAO is being killed. So the global solidarity is a UN of the people, by the people, not of Bill Gates for Bill Gates. So we've got to bring all the levels. We've got to bring all the levels into our thinking and our work. And the national, fascism has always hijacked the national.
Yes. And in fact...
Don't let go. Don't let go of the national space, because that's where regulations happen.
In fact, speaking about the use of the words now, Bill Gates mostly is described as this generous, rich person who's investing his money into good things for people. So,
the reason I wrote Oneness versus 1%, and my son did a lot of the research, is because of the fact that I could see he appears to be giving in philanthropy. Mm-hmm. But if you're not following what he's doing with that, is he's taking the world. So he gives a little bit for the seed banks, but he's taking over all the seeds of the world. So you have to see the full chain of the consequences. So he seems to give for research, but he's taking over the world through gene editing and the new GMOs and the new biotechnologies and the new patenting. So basically, he finds one entry point which looked philanthropic, but if you follow it through, it's imperialism. And that's why I've called his work philantro-imperialism. Nicoletta in Italy has called it philantro-capitalism. And she's got a whole book in Italian on this, which I released, and I was very proud and happy to release it. So you also said, oh, but it was very easy to identify corporations, and now it's difficult. You know, 100 corporations are more difficult to identify. 5 billionaires are very easy to see. All we have to see, what is Google doing? What is Gates doing? What is Facebook doing? They're a handful. And then in the terms of their money being invested through asset management, what's BlackRock and Vanguard and State Street doing? You look at these two levels, you figured out who's taking your freedom, your life, your health, your food. So our work is actually easier.
It seems easier, unfortunately. Now we are a bit more pessimistic, but the great work of people like you is also that you keep giving us the strength and the force to keep searching for the reality, for what's really behind the things. So one last question is about the recent protests in India. They are nothing new, they come from the past, but now there's some new reform that Modi did, no, on agriculture.
Well, these are not new reforms. These are so-called reforms I've been fighting since 91. Every bit of it was in World Bank conditionalities of 91, every element of it. And from 91 onwards, we've been holding it back, protesting. Parliament has been able to prevent the implementation of turning this into law. So it's not new. Neither are the protests new, nor are the laws new. Yeah, it's an epic struggle between profits and life. And farmers are defending life, and the corporations want the profits. And because I've worked so long on this with so many farmers, you know, 30 years is a very long time. You just said, I don't give up, but 30 years is a long time, and normally one should retire after 30 years. But the fathers of the people leading the movement today are people I worked with 30 years ago, resisting the same laws and the WTO and free trade, exactly the same struggle. They've marched for this before. They know. They are not blind. And not just that. If you see, what are they fighting? They're holding signs of 1857, when the farmers of India threw out the East India Company. First corporation of the world, East India Company. First defeat of a first corporation, Indian peasants. 1900, they fought against the British Empire and changed laws. 1942, they started the Quit India movement. It was a peasant women movement, peasant women, yeah? Because of the Great Bengal famine. Protests, we got freedom. 84, the Punjab farmers fought against the Green Revolution. That's what started me on agriculture, and I wrote my book, The Violence of the Green Revolution. 91 to 95 to the WTO, protests to prevent WTO and World Bank being used by global corporations to destroy our agriculture. So it's a continuum. And it's a continuum that won't die. And what we need is, just like I was saying to you earlier, from the local to the regional to the global is one continuum of freedom. This is not separate level. The fascists would like to make it only national. And they would like to hide their partnerships with the global powers and crush the local sovereignty. You are very lucky in Italy. Your whole system is based on the commune. I have addressed so many local communes. You have a structure to defend. So defend the commune against this rising pseudo-sovereignty. Because if there's no foundation, how will a house stand? The commune is the foundation of the country. The second is that we are in the, you know, now most people are so aware of the need for eating good food, need that, you know, Italy knows it has good food. Yeah. You don't want to become dump yards of Mr. Gates's fake food, impossible burger. You know, he's actually written in his new book, he says, people shouldn't call this fake food, because I've been writing about it as fake food. And I can just see the big public relations machinery where he must have paid millions of dollars. Take this book of hers and do a counter, and take this book of hers and do a counter. And there's a part, he said, but this is not fake food, because the muscle and the blood and the meat is like the animal, but it is not the animal. The animal is living. This was grown in the lab with cells. You don't know what you're missing of the whole system. So I think we are living through a contest between truth and falsehood, with big billions financing falsehood. Yeah, we are living through a contest of destruction of life and the celebration of life. And of course, a contest of a new kind of slavery, more invisible because it's digital. Yeah, because when the slaves were taken, they were put in iron chains. We're still in chains, but the chains are not made of iron. They're made by big tech and work through these machines. So we have to be aware of all of this, and the place to begin is know yourself.
So thank you so much, Dr. Shiva.
Thank you.
And,
thank you. Pleasure talking to you. And don't give up the word sovereignty. Don't give up the word freedom. Don't give up the national space. All of this belongs to us.